Chicago in January does not apologize for itself. The wind comes down off Lake Michigan in long, patient sheets, indifferent to glass and steel and the ambitions of men and women who built towers to declare their permanence. It presses against the windows of Hale Global Tower, the way a creditor presses against a locked door without hurry, without mercy, confident in the knowledge that it will eventually be answered. It was 7:14 inches the morning when Daniel Brooks arrived at the service entrance on the building's north side, where the loading dock faced an alley half buried in gray snow. He was 34 years old, though he looked older in the fluorescent utility corridor, not worn, exactly, but settled, the way furniture settles when it has absorbed enough of a house's silence. His maintenance uniform was laundered and pressed. That had always been a point of quiet discipline with him. Even now, even here. He carried a thermos of coffee he had made at home at 5:45 a.m., and his phone was already lit with a message from the school nurse. Lily coughed through the night again. Please make sure she has her rescue inhaler. We've had cold air in the classrooms this week. He read it twice. Then he put the phone in his chest pocket and clocked in. The lobby of Hale Global Tower was a cathedral of pale marble and recessed gold light. The floor was a single continuous slab of Bianco Civet, imported from a quarry in northern Greece, and it required a specific method of care. A neutral pH solution, microfiber pads, no steam, no acid-based cleaner. Daniel had read the maintenance specifications when he started 18 months ago, the same way he had once read server architecture documentation, with the same careful attention to what could go wrong if you were careless. He mopped in slow, overlapping arcs, working from the elevators toward the revolving doors, listening to the weather on his phone's earpiece. Wind chill advisory through 10 p.m. Temperatures may feel as low as -22. Above him, the building was already awake with something heavier than ordinary business. Today was the formal memorial reception for Richard Hale, founder and chairman emeritus, who had died 11 days ago of cardiac arrest in his home study. Hale Global managed $12 billion in diversified real estate, infrastructure, and private equity. Richard Hale had built it from a 2-room office on South Wacker Drive in 1987. He had been, by most accounts, a man of severe intelligence and occasional surprising grace. The floral arrangements had arrived at 6. The catering staff were arranging silver trays in the mezzanine conference room. Security had swept the executive elevator bank twice. Daniel worked and did not think about any of this. He thought about Lily's inhaler, whether the blue one was still in her backpack, or whether she'd put it in the small inside pocket of her coat where she sometimes forgot things. He thought about the pharmacy, which was still holding a balance of $47 on his account. He thought about whether the furnace filter at home needed changing, because the air in the apartment had been dusty in a way that was bad for her lungs. He was working the last quarter of the lobby, near the main entrance, when the revolving door turned and the cold came in ahead of her. Victoria Hale was 36. She had her father's cheekbones and her mother's composure, and a decade at the operational helm of a company that had taught her to read a room the way a surgeon reads an X-ray clinically, efficiently, without sentiment. She wore a black dress under a charcoal wool coat, her dark hair pulled back with the kind of severity that was not vanity but function. Her heels made a precise, definitive sound on the marble. She did not look at Daniel. Very few people did. He understood this. It was not malice. Mostly it was the economy of attention that powerful people practice, unconsciously or otherwise. He was part of the building's infrastructure, like the HVAC system or the elevator cables. Present. Necessary. Invisible. Behind her came 3 members of the executive committee. Harlan Voss, CFO, 61, carrying a leather portfolio and a mouthful of condolence language already rehearsed. Sandra Elliott, General Counsel, 55, speaking quietly into a phone, and Marcus Webb, Chief Strategy Officer, 43, who glanced at Daniel's mop with a faint expression of distaste before following the others toward the elevator. Victoria stopped at the reception desk to sign something. Daniel moved toward the far corner to wring out his mop. The wet section of floor was marked a small yellow caution sign, the kind with the cartoon man falling, but it was positioned perhaps 18 inches too far from the wet edge because Daniel had needed to move it when the caterers wheeled in their cart. He had meant to reposition it after they passed. He had not gotten to it yet. He would think about those 18 inches for a long time afterward. It happened in a fraction of a second. Victoria turned from the reception desk, moving quickly the way she always moved with the assumption that the world had been properly arranged for her passage. Her heel, a narrow 4-inch stiletto, found the edge of the wet marble. The surface gave her nothing. Physics, which is indifferent to title and net worth, did the rest. She went down sharply, catching herself on one knee and one palm, her portfolio sliding across the floor. The sound of it, the crack of her knee on marble, the slap of leather was loud enough to stop every conversation in the lobby. Harlan Voss moved forward. Sandra Elliott lowered her phone. 2 receptionists rose from their seats. A security guard took 2 steps and then stopped, uncertain. Victoria was on her feet before anyone reached her. Her knee was bleeding under her stocking. She could feel the sting of it. The wet warmth, and her left palm was red where it had slapped the floor. She was steady. She was always steady, but the lobby was looking at her. Every person in that room, the receptionists, the catering staff visible through the mezzanine glass, the security guard, Harlan Voss, with his mouth slightly open, had seen Victoria Hale, CEO of Hale Global, fall down in her own lobby on the morning of her father's memorial. The grief she had not shown in 11 days moved through her chest like a fist. It needed somewhere to go. She turned toward Daniel. He was already moving, had already taken 2 steps toward her. Instinctively, the way a person moves when they see someone fall. And he was holding his mop, and there was the wet floor, and the caution sign was visibly misplaced, and he was the janitor, and she was in pain. And these facts arranged themselves in her mind with a speed and force that had nothing to do with fairness. You. Her voice was controlled, but there was something beneath it that was not controlled at all. This floor should have been dry. The sign wasn't positioned correctly. Daniel stopped. He held the mop handle with both hands. I'm sorry. I moved it for the catering cart, and I hadn't repositioned it yet. I should have done that first. I apologize. The apology was clean, direct, and without groveling, which somehow made her angrier. You're responsible for this floor. You had one responsibility this morning. I understand. She looked at him, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time. Though she had passed him in this lobby before, without seeing him, he was looking back at her with an expression that was not defiant, not frightened, not servile. It was something quieter than any of those things. She could not immediately name what it was. You're terminated, she said. Effective immediately. Speak to building management for your final check. The lobby was very quiet. Daniel did not move for a moment. He looked at her with that same unclassifiable expression. Then he nodded once, a single, unhurried nod, and began to step back toward the service corridor. He was almost through the door when he paused. Not dramatically, not for effect, as far as anyone could tell. He simply paused, as if deciding whether to say something. Miss Hale. His voice was low enough that only she and perhaps Harlan Voss could hear it. There are things about your father that you were never told. Then he went through the door. The lobby resumed its quiet preparations for morning. Victoria stood very still for 3 seconds. Then she straightened her coat, picked up her portfolio herself, declining the hand Harlan Voss extended, and walked to the elevator. She did not look at the door through which Daniel Brooks had gone. But she did not forget what he had said. The maintenance staff locker room was in the building's basement, past the boiler room and the electrical panel corridor, in a space that smelled of industrial soap and old coffee. It had 12 lockers, a long bench, and a bulletin board covered in safety notices and a laminated list of emergency contacts. One strip of fluorescent light buzzed slightly at the far end. Daniel sat on the bench and unlaced his boots slowly. Around him, 2 other maintenance workers, Pete, 58, who had worked the building for 9 years, and a younger man named Chris, who was in his first month, were present. Pete sat down beside him. That was wrong, Daniel. What she did, she was embarrassed. She was in pain. Her father died 11 days ago. Daniel put his boots side by side under the bench, precisely. People do things they wouldn't otherwise do. That's a generous read. It's an accurate one. He opened his locker and changed his shirt with the calm efficiency of a man who has had practice not dwelling on things. He took his personal items from the locker shelf, a small framed photo of Lily at age 6 in a yellow raincoat, laughing at something off camera, a paperback novel he was halfway through, a grocery list written in his own handwriting. He stacked them in his bag with care. His phone buzzed. Not the school nurse this time. An unknown number, and then a voicemail. This message is for Daniel Brooks. My name is Evelyn Carter of Carter & Associates. We represent the estate of Richard Hale. You are listed as a required party in the reading of the final will and testament, scheduled for today at 12:30 p.m. in the 42nd floor conference suite. Please contact our office to confirm your attendance. Daniel listened to it twice. Then he sat down on the bench again and was still for a moment. Chris looked over. Everything okay? Yes, Daniel said. Everything is fine. He put on his coat, his civilian coat, a gray wool peacoat, slightly worn at the elbows, well maintained. He picked up his bag. He walked out through the service corridor to the alley. The snow was still falling, patient and indifferent, covering the city in layers of white that would not last. By February, they would be gray. By March, they would be gone. He stopped at the pharmacy 2 blocks east and paid the $47 balance. He picked up the refill for Lily's maintenance inhaler. He put it in his coat's interior pocket, the secure one with the button, where it would not get lost. Then he walked back toward Hale Global Tower. He had somewhere to be at 12:30. The 42nd floor conference suite was not, strictly speaking, a conference room. It was designed for occasions that required the architecture to communicate something about consequence. Floor-to-ceiling windows faced north, offering a view of the city stretching toward the lake, everything white and gray and silver in the winter light. The table was 12 feet of dark walnut, polished to a depth that made it look liquid. The chairs were leather, charcoal, high-backed. Victoria sat at the head of the table. To her right, Harlan Voss, who had straightened his tie twice in the elevator. To her left, Sandra Elliott, who had replaced her phone in her bag and was now entirely present in the way that attorneys become present when legal documents are involved. Marcus Webb sat 2 chairs down, checking the time. Evelyn Carter, 63, managing partner of Carter & Associates, sat at the far end with a leather document case open before her. She had thin, silver hair, reading glasses on a cord, and the composure of someone who has delivered difficult news often enough to have learned to do it with precision rather than gentleness. 2 of Carter's associates flanked her. The room was prepared. The snow fell outside the windows without sound. At 12:27, Victoria turned to Sandra Elliott and said quietly, "Did the building manager confirm the maintenance termination this morning?" "Yes." "Filed at 8:40. Final check to be issued Friday." Victoria nodded. She had not thought about Daniel Brooks in 3 hours, or had told herself she had not. The comment he had made as he left had not left her, exactly. But she had placed it in the category of things that would be examined later, when there was less to manage. At 12:29, Evelyn Carter opened the document case. At 12:30 exactly, the conference room door opened. Daniel Brooks walked in. He was wearing the gray wool peacoat, now dry. He had a collared shirt beneath it, dark blue, pressed. He had no portfolio, no phone in hand, nothing that announced preparation or sophistication. He looked like what he was, a man who had come to a place where he had been summoned, carrying only himself. The room went very quiet. Victoria looked at him across the length of that walnut table. Her expression did not change. But something moved behind it, a recalibration, slight and involuntary. Like a compass needle adjusting, Sandra Elliott leaned toward Victoria and murmured, "That's the janitor from this morning." I know who he is, Victoria said. Evelyn Carter looked up from her documents. Thank you for coming, Mr. Brooks. Please sit. Daniel sat in the chair nearest the door. He folded his hands on the table. He waited. We can begin, Carter said. Evelyn Carter read with the measured pace of someone who understood that the words on the page were doing significant work, and that rushing them would not serve anyone. The will disposed of Richard Hale's personal assets, his private property in Lake Forest, his art collection, his charitable trusts, in the manner expected. Victoria received majority operational control of Hale Global, along with a personal trust of substantial value, as everyone in the room already knew. Harlan Voss received a meaningful bequest. 2 former assistants were remembered. A scholarship fund was formally endowed. Carter paused. She removed her glasses, cleaned them briefly with a cloth, replaced them. It was not a theatrical gesture, it was simply what she did when she was about to read something that required her to be certain she was reading it correctly. There is a final clause, she said, which Mr. Hale instructed be read in the physical presence of all named parties. The named party is Daniel Christopher Brooks. No one looked at Daniel yet. They were looking at Carter. Under the terms of this clause, Daniel Christopher Brooks is to receive 18% of outstanding shares of Hale Global Holdings, Incorporated, held in trust by Carter and Associates until transfer is executed. This constitutes a non-dilutable voting block with protective rights, as described in Appendix D. In addition, Mr. Brooks is to receive a cash settlement of $1.2 million from Richard Hale's personal estate, dispersed within 60 days of this reading. The room did not erupt. It did something more unsettling than that. It went absolutely still. Harlan Voss's pen stopped moving. Marcus Webb's expression became the expression of a man attempting to process a sentence in a language he doesn't speak. Sandra Elliott looked at Carter, then at the document, then at Daniel, in rapid succession. Victoria stood up. She did not say anything for a moment. She stood and looked at Carter, and the room understood she was not going to accept the pause that the moment seemed to require. There must be an error, she said. Her voice was very steady. This is someone who worked in building maintenance. There is an error in the document. There is no error, Carter said. I drafted this clause myself, in Richard Hale's presence, 14 months ago. He reviewed it on 3 separate occasions. It is legally sound and fully executed. Victoria turned then and looked at Daniel. He had not moved. He sat with his hands folded on the table, and he was looking at her with that expression she had not been able to name that morning, and now, in the silence of this room, with 18% of her father's company between them like a physical object, she began to understand what it was. It was the expression of someone who already knew. He had always known. Evelyn Carter removed a secondary document from her case thinner, bound separately, and held it for a moment before setting it flat. Mr. Hale was specific that context be provided, she said. I will summarize, and then read from his personal statement. She looked briefly at Daniel, who gave a small nod of assent. Mr. Brooks holds a bachelor's degree in computer science from the University of Illinois and a master's in systems engineering from Northwestern. He worked for 13 years as a senior systems analyst, most recently at a technology firm contracted by Hale Global. She paused. In February of 2021, during a severe weather event, Mr. Brooks discovered Richard Hale collapsed in the parking structure of this building with what was later confirmed to be a myocardial infarction. He administered appropriate emergency response, waited with Mr. Hale until paramedics arrived, and declined to give his name to the hospital or the press. Harlan Voss's mouth was open. Subsequently, Carter continued. Mr. Brooks identified what he described as a pattern of internal financial misrepresentation within his contract firm's billing to Hale Global, a practice that, had it continued, would have exposed the company to significant legal liability. He reported this internally rather than to regulators, which cost him his position when the firm was dissolved. He made no claim for compensation. He did not pursue legal action. The snow fell outside the windows. No one spoke. His wife, Catherine Brooks, died 18 months later from a pulmonary illness. He has one daughter, Lily, age 7. Carter set the document down. Richard Hale arranged for Mr. Brooks to be employed by the building maintenance contractor at Hale Global. He arranged this quietly, without Mr. Brooks's full knowledge of his involvement, because Mr. Brooks had declined every direct offer of assistance Mr. Hale had extended. Richard Hale also arranged, through intermediaries, for Lily Brooks's medical expenses to be covered a respiratory condition requiring ongoing treatment. The room was so quiet that the ventilation system was audible. Victoria was sitting again. She did not remember sitting down. She was looking at a point approximately 18 inches above the surface of the table. Daniel had not moved. He had not shifted his weight or changed his expression in any visible way. He appeared to be the calmest person in the room, which was not, Victoria realized, because he was unaffected. It was because he had already lived all of this. He had had years to learn its shape. "How long have you known?" Victoria said, and her voice was different than it had been, not the CEO's voice, not the voice from the lobby that morning, something without its scaffolding. "How long have you known what he set aside for you?" Daniel was quiet for a moment. "I knew there was something. I didn't know what." "You never asked." She looked at him. "Why not?" He considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "Because I didn't need him to repay me. He had already." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "He was already being kind, in ways I understood he was doing, and ways I later understood I hadn't fully seen." That was enough. Victoria looked down at the table. Her hands were flat on the walnut surface, very still. And she was doing something that the room had not seen her do. She was trying to hold herself together against something that was pushing from inside. "He paid for her medication," she said quietly. "For Lily. For how long?" "Since Catherine died." She pressed her palms against the table. She breathed once, carefully. Marcus Webb was looking out the window. Harlan Voss was looking at the floor. Only Sandra Elliott was watching Victoria, with the alert stillness of someone who is prepared to be useful if needed. Carter folded her hands. "Miss Hale, I believe you will want to read the letter when you are ready. I will leave it with you." She set an envelope on the table cream, thick paper, sealed with a simple strip of tape, and began to gather her documents. Victoria did not open the letter immediately. She stood and said, in a voice that was entirely controlled, "Give us the room." Carter and her associates left. Marcus Webb rose without a word and followed. Harlan Voss looked at Sandra, who looked at Victoria, who repeated herself without looking at anyone. "Give us the room, please." When they were gone, when the door was closed, when the only sound was the ventilation and the muted noise of the city 42 floors below, Victoria picked up the envelope. She did not look at Daniel. He did not speak. He sat at his end of the table and was still, as he had been still all morning, with the patience of someone who has learned that not all silences need filling. She opened it. The handwriting was her father's. She had known it since childhood. The slanted forward lean of it, the way he formed his capital letters with that slight extra pressure, as if each one required emphasis. She had not seen his handwriting since she'd signed the death certificate. She had not expected to see it again. She read, "Victoria, you will be angry when you read this. That is all right. Anger means you are paying attention, and paying attention is what I always hoped you would do. You learned from me how to run a company. You learned how to read a balance sheet before you were 12, how to identify the weakness in a negotiating position, how to project confidence when you are afraid. I am proud of this. I taught you these things because I wanted you to be able to protect what I built. What I did not teach you, and what I am ashamed to have left so long, is how to see people, not their titles, not their functions, not what they can do for the company or for you. I mean, how to see a person. The full thing, the weight of what they carry, the integrity of how they carry it. Daniel Brooks sat with me for 43 minutes on the floor of a parking structure in a February storm while I believed I was dying. He held my hand because I asked him to, though we had never spoken before that night. He did not leave to call for help a second time after he had already called. He stayed. He told me about his daughter. He talked to keep me conscious, and when I told him I was afraid, he did not reassure me with false certainty. He said, "I know, but you are not alone right now." That was the most honest thing anyone has said to me in 40 years of business. I have watched him in the years since. I want you to understand what I have watched. A man who lost his professional standing rather than look away from something dishonest. A man who lost his wife and did not lose himself. A man who mops a marble floor with the same care he once gave to systems architecture, not because he is diminished, but because he is who he is, regardless of the work in front of him. I kept him in this building because I wanted him near. I am not sure he fully knew why, though I suspect he understood more than he let on. I arranged small things because he would not accept large ones. He has more dignity than I have been able to purchase in a lifetime. I am leaving him what I am leaving him because it is right. Not as payment, there is no adequate payment. As recognition, as the record showing that character is worth something. Whatever else the market says, what I am asking of you is harder. I am asking you to lead this company the way Daniel lives his life, with the understanding that the people on every floor of this building matter in full. Not just as functions or line items. You know how to be excellent. I am asking you now to learn how to be worthy of the people who work for you. You may have fired him this morning. If you did, I imagine you had a reason that seemed sufficient in the moment. That is the lesson I am writing to you about. I love you without condition. I am proud of you without condition. Both of those things can be true alongside everything else I have just said. Dad. Victoria set the letter on the table. She sat for a long time without speaking, one hand flat against her father's handwriting, as if she were reading it through her palm, absorbing some frequency of it that the words alone couldn't carry. The light through the windows was flat and white. The snow had not stopped. When she finally looked up, Daniel was watching her with the quiet, undramatic attention of someone who is simply present. She had expected, she realized had half expected, without knowing it, that there would be something in his expression by now. Satisfaction, vindication, the natural human response to watching someone who has wronged you understand what they have done. She was a person who noticed and catalogued these things, who used them. There was none of that. There was only attention, patience. Something that was not pity and not compassion. Exactly, but that occupied the same general region. She found that harder than any of the rest. She stood. She was steady, she was always steady, but her hands, when she pushed back from the table, were not as certain as they usually were. She walked the length of the table. She stopped when she was 3 feet from him, and she looked at him directly. As she had not done that morning had not done, she understood now, since she had never actually looked at him at all before today. "I fired you this morning," she said, in front of people, for something that was partially my negligence for not looking where I was walking. Daniel waited. "I did it because I was in pain," she continued, "and because you were there, and because you were easy to dismiss. And I told myself a story about it that made it the right thing to do, and it was not the right thing to do." She paused. She was not looking for a response. She was completing something that needed to be completed. "I am sorry." She said it, without softness and without performance, the way you say a thing that you mean and that costs something to say. "I would like you to come back to work at whatever position makes sense, with a proper title and salary, if that's what you want. If you don't want that, I understand it. Either way, I'm sorry for this morning." Daniel was quiet for long enough that the silence had texture. "I accept the apology," he said. "Genuinely. There's no but. I accept it." She looked at him. "You're not angry." "I'm not angry. You should be." He considered this with what appeared to be genuine seriousness. "Maybe. I was, for a while, after Catherine died, angry at everything, at a scale that had nothing to do with what I was actually angry at. I learned to put it down." Not all at once. Slowly. He paused. Anger at you this morning would be choosing to make something bigger than it was. You were grieving, and you fell down and you took it out on someone who was convenient. I've done worse. Not much worse, she said. No, he agreed. Not much worse. For the first time in this conversation, in this entire morning, something shifted in her expression that was not grief, and not guilt, and not the professional composure she wore like a sex skin. It was something more uncertain and more human than any of those things. My father loved you, she said. He was kind to me. No. She shook her head. I mean he. She stopped and started again. He wrote 43 paragraphs about why he believed in you. He rearranged a company asset transfer to make sure you were recognized. He paid for your daughter's medicine for 2 years without telling you who he was. That is not kindness. That is love, of a particular kind. She looked at him steadily. He didn't tell me about you. He didn't tell me about any of it. I'm trying to understand why. Daniel looked at the window. The city beyond it was white and gray and immense. He told me once, the only time we really talked about it directly, that he was afraid, he said. Not of what you'd think of him, of what you'd think of yourself when you understood the distance between the person he wanted you to be and the person he'd helped create. He paused. He wasn't criticizing you. He was admitting his own part in it. Victoria said nothing. He was proud of you, Daniel said. That's not a consolation. It's just true. 2 weeks passed before Daniel made any formal decision about the shares. In that time, he took Lily to her follow-up pulmonology appointment. Her inflammation markers were improved. The doctor adjusted her maintenance dosage. Lily drew a picture of her doctor with enormous hands, which she gave him with great ceremony, and the doctor taped it to his wall. Daniel sat in the waiting room for that appointment and thought about the 18th floor of Hale Global Tower, where he had mopped the carpet around the executive suites at 7 in the morning for the past 18 months, moving carefully around the corners of desks and the legs of chairs belonging to people who did not see him, and thought about what it meant to own a portion of a thing you had invisibly maintained. He met with Evelyn Carter on a Thursday morning in a conference room that was not the 42nd floor, a smaller room, more human in its proportions. He brought a typed list of questions that he had written out longhand first, then retyped. Carter answered each one with the directness he had come to appreciate about her. He did not try to maximize. He tried to understand. The following Monday, Daniel met with Victoria Hale. She had called him. He had agreed. The meeting was at 9 a.m. in a smaller office on the executive floor, not the boardroom, not the memorial setting, just a working room with a round table and 4 chairs and a window showing the lake, still frozen, beginning its long argument with the approaching spring. The shares, Daniel said. I want to use them in a specific way. Victoria was listening. I don't want board control. I'm not equipped for that, and I'm honest enough to say so. He had his typed list in front of him. But I want the protective rights to have meaning. I want them used for 3 things, and I want them enshrined in the shareholder agreement, not just policy documents. Tell me, first, a medical support fund for employees below the director level, specifically for dependents with chronic illness. Lily's situation isn't unusual. I met people in that basement locker room whose kids needed things they couldn't pay for. That needs to change. Victoria wrote something. Second, an emergency stabilization fund. Something that pays out quickly when an employee has a sudden catastrophic expense, not loans, not applications, just access. 2 months' salary maximum, annually. That's significant capital. Yes, I know what it's worth. I know what the alternative looks like. She was not looking at him the way she had looked at him in the lobby 16 days ago. She was looking at him the way she looked at Carter when Carter was reading something that required her to adjust what she already believed. Third, Daniel said, the maintenance and facilities staff gets the same HR access as corporate staff. Same complaint processes, same performance review structures, same advancement pathways, equal access, not separate systems. Victoria set her pen down. None of those are unreasonable, she said. They'll cost money. Yes, I've run rough figures. I'll share them with your CFO. She looked at him for a moment. You ran figures. I used to be a systems analyst. Something passed across her face, brief, complex, not quite a smile, and not quite regret, but something that contained elements of both. My father knew exactly what he was doing, she said. He usually did. She picked up her pen. I'll have Sandra draft the language. You should have your own attorney review it. Carter will represent the estate's interests, but you need independent counsel. I have seen one. Good. She closed her notebook. Daniel. She said his name without the prefatory distance of a title, and he understood this was intentional. I'm going to hold this company to what you're describing, not because of the voting rights, because my father was right about what I didn't learn, and I'm trying to learn it. He looked at her steadily. That's all it takes, he said. Just the trying. 3 weeks after the will, reading, on a Thursday that smelled for the first time like the possibility of March, Daniel walked Lily to school. She was bundled in her yellow coat, a new one, because she had grown 2 inches since September, and the old one's sleeves stopped at her wrists, and she wore her backpack with its careful arrangement of supplies and her rescue inhaler in the front pocket, where she had agreed to keep it after a long negotiation. She was 7, and she had her mother's narrow face and her father's tendency toward silence, and she was currently conducting a one-sided conversation about whether caterpillars could remember being caterpillars after they became butterflies. What do you think? Daniel asked. I think they can't, Lily said, with the authority of someone who has considered the matter. Because they're completely different inside. Like their whole brain changes, so they probably don't remember anything. That sounds sad. It's not, though. She considered the sidewalk ahead of her. Because they don't know, they forgot. They're just a butterfly now. Daniel looked at her. That's a good way to think about it, he said. She took his hand, which she still did sometimes, when the sidewalk was slippery or when she simply felt like it. The slush had frozen overnight and re-thawed in the morning, and the footing was uncertain. He walked carefully, as he always did. He was always watching the ground. The school was 3 blocks from their apartment. When they reached the front walk, Lily turned, stood on the 3rd step to be approximately eye level with him, and offered her cheek for a kiss, which he provided. You don't have work today? She asked. Not this morning. I have a meeting later. She nodded, satisfied with this accounting. Will you pick me up? I'll pick you up. She went up the steps and through the doors without looking back, the way children go completely, all at once, already inside the next part of the day before they had finished saying goodbye to the last one. Daniel stood on the front walk for a moment. A black car was parked at the curb. It had been there when they arrived. He had noticed it and not said anything. Victoria Hale got out of the back. She was not in her CEO clothes, or not only in them. She wore a good coat, and she carried nothing. No portfolio, no phone in hand. She looked, for the first time in the time Daniel had known her, slightly uncertain in her body, not fragile, but undefended in a way that she had not been in any of their other meetings. I looked up her school, she said. I have something. She reached back into the car and came out with a small box, the kind from a medical supply company, compact, labeled with specifics he recognized immediately. A new spacer device for Lily's inhaler, the pediatric model, the right color, the correct attachment for the device she was using. Her current one was recalled 2 weeks ago, Victoria said. I saw it in the news. I wasn't sure if you'd caught it. He had not caught it. He looked at the box and then at her. I wasn't sure this was appropriate, she said. Coming here. This might be overstepping, and if it is, tell me. Daniel took the box from her carefully. He turned it over once in his hands. Then he looked up. It's not overstepping, he said. The morning light was pale and specific. The way winter light is specific, it does not spread. It selects, finding edges and planes, and the surfaces of things that were obscured in the broader light of other seasons. Victoria Hale stood in it and looked, for a brief moment, very much like the daughter of a man who had sat with Daniel on a cold parking garage floor and held his hand and been afraid, and had afterward become someone he genuinely liked. She nodded once. She was not, Daniel noticed, entirely composed. Her eyes were red at the rims. She had cried that morning, or the night before, or both. She was carrying something still, and would be for a long time, because grief is not a problem that gets solved. "How is she?" Victoria asked. "Lily. She's good," he said. "She's asking questions I can't answer about butterflies." A short, involuntary sound came out of Victoria, not quite a laugh, but something in that family. Something that surprised her when it came. "She sounds like someone who will figure things out." "She is," Daniel said. They stood for a moment in the thin winter light on the front walk of a school in Chicago, with the city going about its ordinary business around them, the buses, the delivery trucks, the neighbors walking dogs in their heavy coats, the steam rising from the sidewalk grates in columns that dissolved into the pale air above. "I'll see you Thursday," Daniel said, "for the shareholder meeting." "Yes." Victoria straightened her coat. "I'll have Sandra's draft ready." He nodded. She turned back toward the car, then stopped. "Daniel." She did not turn around fully. Her voice was measured, not emotional, but carrying the weight of something carefully chosen. "He was right about you." She got into the car. Daniel watched it pull away. Then he looked at the medical supply box in his hands, at the technical specifications printed on the side, at the small diagram showing correct assembly. He put it in his coat's interior pocket, the secure one with the button, where things did not get lost. Then he walked toward the rest of the morning. The snow, which had been threatening since Tuesday, finally came, not in sheets, not in the heavy dramatic fashion of January, but lightly, in small exploratory flakes, as if the weather were trying something new and was not yet sure it would stick. It might not. Either way, the ground would be cleaner for it.